We exist in a state of perpetual interdependence.
Watching the spinning samsara.
We are on some kind of journey in this life.
To be more aware, to be more conscious, more compassionate.
It's what we do when we get out of the way.
Less caught up in the stories we tell ourselves.
To serve life.
Open, tender, heart awareness.
Interdependence.
Meditation. The Interdependence Project.
Welcome to the ID Project podcast. This week's podcast features Sokuzan Bob Brown in a lecture and discussion around his deep experience in both Tibetan Tantric and Soto Zen practices. Sokuzan Bob Brown is an ordained Zen priest in the Soto lineage, and he was a student of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, Kobun Chino Roshi, and is currently a student of Sakyong Mipham Rinpoche and His Holiness the 17th KarmapaOgyen Trinley Dorje. He has been involved with art for over 50 years through his experience as an illustrator in the Marine Corps and his attendance at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago and the Corcoran Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C.
So the words Zen and Tantra are heavily interesting, heavily confusing, heavily conceptualized, heavily. It's like we all have heard of Zen, we all have heard of Tantra, and we all have our ideas. We've read about it. We think we know things about it, and then we read something where, oh, I didn't know that about Tantra, or I didn't know that about Zen, and so on and so forth. So I am not a scholar by any means at all. I don't remember much, and a lot of what I remember is useless. On the other hand, sometimes memory is useless. If you're using memory to reinforce your identity, if you're using memory and discursive thought and thinking processes, analyzing, subtracting, dividing, doing a lot of mental math, you may be using up the energy that you actually need for your awakening. If you are a person who wants to awaken, studying the teachings of the Buddha, and down through the centuries, this incredible cumulative tradition of realization. This is not a revealed religion like some religions are, not to take anything away from them. Some people they couldn't handle this kind of a practice. They need to have a stronger focus in terms of a avatar, savior or something. And that's fine, they should do that. But in this particular situation, as students of Buddhism, whether you consider yourself a Buddhist or not, if you're a student of Buddhism, then in that sense anyway, you're a Buddhist, whether you receive precepts or take vows or not, or even if you have a teacher or not. That's up to you. And I like to say you should really trust yourself as to what you need to do. You should look very closely. The downside of the culture we're in is Buddhism is everywhere. And people are calling things Buddhism that's nowhere near Buddhism. And people they're just a few blocks away from each other. You have everything, Zen, Tantra, Theravadan practices, and all of the other approaches that people just invent based on they've studied Buddhism and now they think they're ready to teach Buddhism. So I like to have a conversation around this. I'm going to talk a little while longer, but please don't hesitate to interrupt me or ask questions about what's going on or what you perceive as going on, or questions you may have that I probably don't know how to answer. So I first read, the first book I read on, just to give you a little background on Buddhism, was in 1960. I was in the Marine Corps. I was laying out getting a suntan, which I don't get very well because I'm pretty light, but I was laying out there and someone handed me this book by Paul Reps called Zen Flesh, Zen Bones, and said, what is this? What does this mean? Do you know what this means? And I read, it was a little koan or something there, and I read it, and of course I read it, and then I read it again, and I read it again. I thought, well, that doesn't mean anything. I mean, that's what does that mean? Why would somebody even write such a thing? I remember being very perplexed by it, and I handed it back to the fellow. I said, I don't know. Why are you reading that? And it kind of went on like that. And then we talked a little bit, and it seemed to be more and more interesting. And later on, I started thinking, I want to find out more about this. So I kept looking. Of course, at that time, all you had was Alan Watts, W.Y. Evans Wentz, and D.T. Suzuki, which is nothing wrong with those people, but you didn't have an awful lot. There was probably in a bookstore, there might have been, if you were in a big bookstore, it might have been half a dozen books or so that were available. And the only translation, I think, a Heart Sutra was translated by Kanzi. I think that was out there. There wasn't much. So I looked around at that, and spent quite a number of years. Sat my first sesshin with Chogyam Roshi in the early 70s. Met Trungpa Rinpoche in 1973. Became a student of his. Choicelessly became a student of his because he terrified the hell out of me. It was terrifying. It was you sit down in front of someone that can see right through you. So I had the bittersweet feeling of being very, very lucky and very, very frightened at the same time. Like, maybe after 12 years of studying this and looking into this, maybe I've actually met somebody that I can trust, maybe? So my first love, you could say, or my first the first thing I was magnetized by was Zen. And so I did a lot of reading, whatever I could find in that area. But then I didn't meet a Zen teacher. I met Trungpa Rinpoche, the Vidyadhara, the Dorje Drattel of Mukpo. And it didn't seem to matter whether he was Zen or he could have been from the moon. I still would have. I was extremely magnetized by him. So I went to Naropa, studied there, and became a student of his, and kept reading everything I could. Started practicing, and got involved in that whole world of Vajradhatu, it was called then, before Shambhala. Did a lot of retreat practice, Datun, month-long sitting, did some solitary retreats, kept practicing and studying, and also reading all over the place. I still, even today, I'm really interested in reading whatever's out there. So I'd like to say it this way. Look at your motivation for whatever you're doing. You may need to go in the direction of tantric practice, Vajrayana practice. You may need to find a lama. You may need to talk to him or her about your practice, become a student of theirs, and be under their tutelage. It's your own particular wiring, your own chemistry, there's so many things. It's called causes and conditions. You have causes here, you have conditions here, and there's no way to see what those are. It's like looking at a tree and trying to see what its roots look like. You cannot see it. called natural hierarchy. Roots are not sticking up in the air. On the other hand, if you check things out, trust yourself, and go and look at the various, which you have, especially in New York, you have just about everything. I'm not talking about spiritual supermarket so much. As I'm saying, go and look at things closely and see what it is for you. Talk to other people about it, but also see what it really is or what it means for you. Kind of like you're looking for a teacher, but on the other hand, if you have any doubts, and people will not necessarily agree, other teachers or whomever, doesn't matter, but I like to say it this way: if you have any doubts about a teacher, then he or she is not your teacher. If you have any doubts at all, and when I say that, I mean the teaching situation needs to be choiceless, because if you have any doubts, then as soon as the way gets a little difficult, then we start criticizing or not approving of what the teacher's saying, or say, well, I don't know what they said there. I don't know about that. You know, I think I need to do this, or I think I need to do that. And you know there's nothing wrong with that. Again, I would say trust yourself. Maybe you do need to go another direction. As far as the two lineages, you can call them lineages of the Zen approach, which is made up of lots of different lineages. The Tantric approach, which is made up of the four main orders and all the sub-orders, not to mention all the individual teachers and their particular take on how to present this, how to teach this. Just like the difference between Trungpa Rinpoche and Sakyong Rinpoche. Completely disagreed on how to do this. Both of them young tulkus coming from Tibet in the late 60s. And it's not that one is right or one is wrong. I know someone who's a student of Sakyong. Perfect match, probably. But it's just that you should, from my experience or understanding, find a teacher, unless you just want to take the Pratyeka Buddha approach, which is, of course, for those of you who have studied Buddhism, is a self-styled way of approaching this. It's not wrong, but it doesn't go a long ways. So you may need to practice in the Zen form, which is mainly about strong environment, holding very still, and just observing. Shikantaza means, it's Japanese for just sitting. In other words, just sit and observe what arises. Don't push it down, don't fluff it up, and don't look away from it or distract yourself. Whereas the Tantric approach, or Vajrayana, also has a formless practice like this. But for those of you who are familiar with the Nundro practice of 100,000 prostrations, 100,000 repetitions of the Vajrasattva mantra, 100,000 offerings to the mandala, and in some cases 1,000,000 mantras in Guru Yoga to His Holiness Karmapa, before you even begin your sadhana. So it's a real meat grinder for ego or self-centeredness. But sitting and facing a wall is also very difficult. It's just a different way. One is not better than the other. And if you begin to evaluate, if you start to compare, you are missing what is being presented here. Anytime you compare, as long as there's an ego-centered, narcissistic me happening here, and you all know what that is, then that comparison is always going to be in terms of the self-centeredness, evaluating in terms of me and what's out there. So what's being recommended is just look. Don't do anything unless you have to. Just look. Listen to what this teacher says. Read this book. We're in a situation culturally where you can literally have access to everything. I mean, you don't even have to leave your apartment, go on the internet. You can read translations of everything. You can meet tons of commentaries. They're just amazing out there what is available compared to what there was when I started looking at this close to 50 years ago. And I'm saying, by all means, look everywhere. Don't be too quick. If you don't need to do anything, don't do it. So you may need to connect on one level for a while, and it might change into something else. You may meet a teacher that he or she will take you a little ways, and then it changes into something else. This is not to be corrected. There's nothing to correct. I'll say it again. There is nothing to correct anywhere. Never has been, never will be. The sooner we realize that, the sooner we just stop meddling with our world, and we become less and less separate from it, and more completely with whatever is arising. This doesn't mean you don't object to someone beating their dog. In fact, you should go and take hold of them. Let them know you're not going to put up with that crap. See what I'm saying? I mean, you know, you don't. It isn't like you see something like that happen. You don't think, gee, I'm a pretty peaceful guy, and yet he's beating his dog. I'm going to have to go and take that club away. You know, by that time the dog's half dead. What you do is you're there because you've trained your mind, because you have practiced being where? Right here. This is it right here. You're actually looking at your own enlightenment right now. When I say that, I don't mean this guy. I'm just saying that wherever you look, that's it. Wherever you look, you are seeing that. It may be in the form of your self-centeredness, but that's what you need to look at. That's why wall gazing, as Bodhidharma talked about so many centuries ago, works. But if wall gazing doesn't work, then do Nundro practice. Do some other kind of practice. The chemistry between you and the teacher is very, very important. Studying with I had two teachers. One was Trungpa Rinpoche, that I met in '73. It was completely choiceless. It just scared the daylights out of me because I knew I was in for it, you could say. I knew that I was not going to be able to hide out from this guy. Is there anyone here that met him? Am I right or am I right? Yeah. He was. But that's because you are. Well, he could do that too. It's always a mirror, always a mirror. There was no individual there. There was a formation that came out of karma, causes and conditions, creates that situation, that coming together as a teacher. Like I said before, if you have any questions, please interrupt. I'd much rather have a mutual or question and answer situation. Yes, sir.
I was just...
it's Andrew, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was studying Zen and came across this notion of Shikantaza,
Yes.
the similarities really struck me at how it compares to Dzogchen or Tibetan
Yes.
Ati meditation, very much the same thing.
It is.
Talk a little more about that.
We're talking Ati or Mahamudra, direct pointing at the mind. Shikantaza just takes a while. It's a matter of just sitting and just waiting. It's like waiting at a bus station where there's no buses. You know, that's the attitude that begins to arise. We just wait, and we become more and more encouraged by what actually is happening with the mind and possibly by your interaction with a teacher. The Depends. But it's very much direct. There's only one awakening. There's not a Mahamudra awakening, a Shikantaza awakening, a Zen awakening, a Tantrika. There's only reality. If you awaken to it, you know it. You are not in doubt. You are certain. And that certainty is also uncertainty. Not separate. Not separate. The analytical, conceptual mind does not know what to do with that. We want a reference point. Well, you're either right or wrong. Well, that's the nature of the mind, right and wrong. It's called duality, plus and minus, up and down, back and forth, good and evil. Buddhas and sentient beings, which if you read the sutras, you'll find that even there it's saying no separation. So Mahati or Dzogchen, the great perfection, is just the way that has been laid out, that in order to even approach such a thing, first you have to go through all the preliminary, the four foundation practices, and slowly work up to that, and then slowly you start moving into that. At the same time, you have the pointing out instruction of your teacher. Mm-hmm.
So Shikantaza, is that something that a student begins rather early on in their path, or I always thought of it as being rather advanced?
It's both. You know, in some ways it's broken down, like there's a Shamatha Vipassana, locked tongue and Shine, mindfulness awareness practice. You can break them down into parts to talk about them, but there's no difference. There may be a difference in the way you practice it. You might start out working with the breath, labeling thinking, or whatever your technique is to slowly ground yourself. But you can also just hold still and observe. It's fundamentally, they're not two separate things. Shikantaza, as far as I know, I don't speak Japanese, but just means just sitting. More, Andrew?
Well, when you're just sitting, when you're just observing
Yes.
what's occurring in your mind, how might, I mean, it's not in terms of like how do you attain enlightenment, but these are formless methods, mostly, more or less, like completion stage practice, of just observing the flavors of your own mindfulness, the colors of your mind.
I understand what you're saying. Do you have a question?
Well, I suppose my question between the two is like the same practice, when you just sit there. And, you know what my question is? Are the flavors of experience doing these practices different when you take them out of their cultural context?
Totally. Chocolate, vanilla, still ice cream. You know? What'd I say?
Chocolate and still ice cream.
What do I mean by that?
Well, it's still ice cream.
Right. I mean, still, I kind of say maybe I'm jumping the gun and maybe I should give you a little more time
No, I
to.
think you're right.
Whoa. I'm right? That's scary. Maybe I could say it this way. They have all these different methods for practicing. There are just so many. Look at all the tantras and look at all of the different kinds of, I mean, there's just so many. And each teacher, from Trungpa Rinpoche to the Sakyong Mipham to Pomlop Rinpoche, everybody's doing something a little bit different, just in the Vajrayana tradition. And then in the Zen tradition, all of these teachers are approaching things completely different. My Zen teacher, Kobun Chino Roshi, was a master of form, yet he didn't particularly encourage people to go and study at a monastery or something, or study intense forms. So it's not that it's so much up for grabs, but it's more like in our culture, in the context in which we find ourselves, really need to trust ourselves. And when I talk about trust, this is how I mean it. I'm I'm looking at all of you and I have no idea what I'm seeing. My mind is not doing anything except saying what I'm saying, but I'm saying trust is not believing your thoughts or knowing something about something else. Trust is the confidence, unconditional confidence that you don't need to know. What you need to know will appear, and then you can know it, and then you can let go of it. You actually can have unconditional confidence by just being present. It's called authentic presence, according to Trungpa Rinpoche. Just be here. Just be here. The world will it'll work just fine. You get your laundry done. Just be present. Any teacher, whether it's in the Advaita tradition, Papaji, Nisargadatta Maharaj, Ramana Maharshi, any of the other teachers that are disciples or students of them in that tradition are all saying the same thing. This is it. You're right here, right now. Look right at that wall. Or if the wall is claustrophobic, then look out at the floor. Pretty much the same thing. You would know which one of those might be best for you to do. And do a lot of it. Schedule yourself. Questions? Please.
I started in the Shambhala tradition a little bit, and then I sat Zen for 2 years, and then I went to Bhutan, and now I'm back to the Tibetan tradition.
Yes.
I had a bit of a disagreement with my Zen teacher. I was at the time working at an AIDS clinic, and I said that, and it was a really horrible clinic. There were cockroaches, people were spitting, it was just a nasty place. And I said I felt that, I'm a psychiatrist, I felt that the service that I was doing there, because a lot of it was badly paid, unpaid, there was physical danger, I said I felt that this was my practice. And she said, you need to show up here and sit more. There's always going to be sick people, there's always going to be assholes, you just need to sit, you need to sit, you need to sit. And I was like, but this is my practice, this is me burning up what I have to enlighten other people and to practice compassion.
Two questions before you go on. What is your name?
Christina.
Christina, and where was this Zen teacher at?
Sat at Still Mind.
Still Mind, okay. Okay.
And she was amazing in some ways.
Sure.
On that one, we just really fell out.
Okay. Yeah. Was she your teacher?
Yeah.
Were you totally sure of that when you met her and sat with her? Yeah.
No.
That's
She was my boyfriend's teacher.
Yeah.
But
well, you can see kind of what I'm referring to there. Yeah. You need to be really sure of that stuff, because the minute there's any kind of a, then we start having, and it's not a matter, can you see that it's not a matter of you're right and she's wrong, or vice versa? It's not a matter of right and wrong.
I mean, it's all good, I guess, but
I didn't say that. I would never say it's all good. That's bullshit.
when you say, well, that's where kind of I was.
It's not all good.
But so you're saying there's no right teacher, wrong teacher?
I'm saying I'm encouraging people individually to look really close at your practice situation, and it's not a matter of deciding. Deciding is about comparing. I'm not saying anyone should decide. I'm saying look very closely. It sounded like you were doing pretty good there, though. Something about what you were doing rings true somehow.
I guess it was just like, I felt like the lack of real worldness
Okay.
really made me feel like I was going off into
What do you think?
in tenets against the words that I didn't want.
Who's your teacher?
No one else was there but me.
Without a teacher, Okay. It's really hard to access all of that
What are you doing
foreign
now?
cultural stuff that's been going on for centuries.
Okay.
With the teacher,
Coming here,
you can
okay.
begin to see what that is and how that
do you have any
functions.
questions?
Now, everyone's a little different. Some people just love this stuff and don't have any trouble with it because they just like to be, it's kind of a little bit of an entertainment going on, but it gets them into it. Other people are saying, what is it? Why should I visualize white Tara, green Tara, Chenrezig, and say a bunch of words that don't mean anything and visualize things, and it just seems like ridiculous. I'm not sure if that's how you're feeling.
Yeah, I just feel like I don't, it feels like icon worship, like the medieval people
Yeah.
who would look at an icon and want to be transported
Yeah.
through that picture.
It's not that.
It's not that.
It's just a mechanism for working with awareness. It's hard to just see what is true, because we do what? Like it says in the Lankavatara Sutra, things arise, we give them names, and we project our ideas onto them. And what's being said here in the Zen tradition, keep looking at that. Look at how things arise, look at how we name it, and look how we project on it, and don't meddle with it. And eventually you'll see what that is. And when you see that, then you begin to see suchness. You begin to see reality, of which you are not separate from. As far as if you don't have a teacher connection, it's very hard to do tantric practices. You almost have to have a guru. That's why they have such power, because they're, in order to do this, you've got to have somebody kind of railroad you into it. Am I right? Doesn't make it wrong. Someone else might say, well, this isn't any problem. I kind of understand. I think doing visualizations and doing mantra, that makes sense to me. I'm going to do this. And their connection with their teacher still might not be very strong, but they might be able to somehow, because of the way they're wired, for lack of a better way of saying it. In you said you're a psychiatrist? Yeah. So are you working in the field right now, working with people?
Yeah.
And do you do sitting meditation? Yeah, I would do completely formless meditation all the time.
It used to be that I would get burnt out thinking about all the stuff that had happened that I heard, because I hear a lot of traumatic stuff. And since I've been practicing, it's about 7 or 8 years, I feel like Jack Kornfield says, you take that and you give it up to someone else. Like, I don't sit around and process stuff anymore the way I used to, because I just trust that the other person has the authenticity, and I don't need to. Like, it's the past is gone. It's really changed my burnout level and my ability to really just be there with the patient. So I think it's positive in that way.
Do you have any questions for me beyond that?
What made you go towards away from where
I've not gone anywhere.
you haven't gone anywhere? Okay.
I've not gone towards anything. I've not gone away. I just, it was choiceless for me. When I met my teacher, my second teacher, a Zen monk, I did not believe it. I thought I was all done. I thought I already had a teacher. I didn't need to do any more. I did everything I could to keep from going that direction, but it was irresistible for me. It was choiceless for me. There was no choice involved. But from this point of view over here, there's no difference between Zen and Tantra. That's why when Patrick said, well, let's call it Zen and Tantra, I thought, wonderful. I'll talk about Zen and Tantra. So, although there are, obviously all kinds of differences, we can read about it. But from the point of view of realization, they're just paths going up the mountainside. Some people say Tantra has no handrails, and if you do that, whereas Zen has handrails. Well, my teacher Kobun said path of Zen is actually above the mountain. There's not even a reference point of a mountain. And if you met him, if you ever met him, you'd see what I'm saying. I mean, he was completely reference pointless.
I had a friend
Yes.
in Bhutan who thought that monks could meditate and levitate. You would
Yeah.
hear them in the temples.
He just had gas.
Levitate. What do you think about all that magical stuff? Flying tigers, levitating. Is it metaphor? What is that?
Why don't you, when you say, what do you think about it, that's kind of like a conversation. And I love conversations, but this is actually a presentation on Zen and Tantra. Okay. So the more you can ask direct questions, and I can respond directly, and there'll be a lot more clarity around it.
Do you think that the physical body undergoes changes at those intense moments of practice that might include levitation?
Anything is possible. Anything is possible. Beyond that, I don't know. All I know is you're looking at a miracle right now. It's absolutely miraculous and ordinary, flat ordinary. At the same time, it's called non-dual, not two, one taste. Just this, just this, just this. When you stop dividing in your mind, pushing away the bad stuff, trying to get the good stuff, and ignoring what you can't control, you will begin to see what I just mentioned a few minutes ago. Things arise, appearance, we name them, then we project our ideas of good and bad, plus and minus on it. I say stop meddling with that, and you can do that by looking at this. Stop looking at that, and you will begin to see. What will you begin to see? You begin to see, it's not two, there's not two things. You can see a sacred world and an ordinary world at the same time. Enough to make you weep. Andrew.
Well, I'm just thinking about the question earlier, and I'm articulating it a little better. In terms of Tantra, the Vajra practice, there's a sense that you're actually working with your neurotic emotions.
I understand.
Understanding the light quality
Yes.
of your mind and how it rises with your hang-ups.
I'm following you, yes.
And then in the Zen approach, there's this slogan, it's like, if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha.
That's one of the slogans.
And I'm kind of like thinking about the skull cup and teacup thing. And,
I'm familiar with that book.
in terms of actually working with emotions on a Zen level and actually working with neurotic emotions, that slogan, if you meet the Buddha, kill the Buddha, is actually quite penetrating.
What's your question?
I was just wondering if you could comment on what is sort of bubbling in my brain.
I can't comment on what's bubbling in your brain, but I could respond to a question if you can put it clear.
What is the Zen approach for working with intense neurotic emotions?
Look at them and don't add. Look at them, and the way we look at emotions and when I say don't add, I'm saying look at the degree to which you add. It's Trungpa Rinpoche referred to any additional adding on top of the original spontaneous adding as double negativity. So you have to begin to see that. The way we begin to see that is very slowly watch how we keep creating our own misery. And it takes time, and it takes a lot of practice. One has to hold still and observe that over long periods of time. It seems. Our karma is not necessarily just this lifetime. This karma, I like to say, go look in the mirror. How did this happen? How did you get to be you with your particular dynamic, your everything from your skin color to your name to your disposition to your intelligence and on and on and on. How did this happen? Just like a beginningless time, puts everything through causes and conditions together, and it comes up as your particular dynamic. What is being said here is precious human birth. Use this precious human birth to find out who you are. Find out who you are outside of any Zen or Tantra. Find out. You may practice Zen, you may practice Tantra, you may have a guru, you may have a meditation instructor, you may have a really good Sangha. Lots of ways, and it's your own way. You need to really trust yourself to look at it. If anybody is trying to sell you on anything, red flags should go up. Anybody's trying to convince you, oh, you should do this, you shouldn't do that, you should do this. It's bullshit. It just is. I mean, if you look at it, somebody has some kind of an agenda, they're not sure what to do with their own damn life, their own meditation. They're trying to manipulate you. If they can just get you to join this or go there or practice this. And the interesting thing is what they're actually suggesting for you to do might be a very good thing for you to do, but it gets confused because they haven't actually trusted you to use your intelligence to do what you think you should do. This is one thing about Trungpa Rinpoche and Kobun Chino Roshi. I don't care what kind of reputation they've got. They were very, very clear about who they were talking to. I would have done, for Trungpa Rinpoche, I would have done anything he said, and he knew it. And the only thing he told me is sit a lot. Sit a lot. In fact, he put me into the first 10-day solitary retreat. I didn't ask. He said, so you want to go into retreat? And I remember thinking, I do? But I was so intimidated, So the next thing I found myself, 1974, I was sitting 10 days up in what's now Shambhala Mountain, looking at the wall or looking at the floor. Heather.
What if you, in this teacher relationship,
Yes.
I mean, it sounds like fear comes up.
It can. It can.
It can. But if you're also if you're saying that, don't trust this thought,
What did I say?
well, you don't necessarily follow your thoughts.
Don't necessarily believe them.
Don't necessarily believe the thoughts.
You can follow your thoughts, but it's just like watching a Bruce Willis movie. I mean, he's really good. He's an actor, and it's really scary. And we know it's a movie, but man, what if somebody kills him? I mean, it's Bruce. We don't want anybody to kill this guy. He's in the movie. And so we have that feeling of, at the same time we don't believe it because we know he's an actor, it's a movie, we're watching it. At the same time we're there with that, we're with the emotion. So I think that's a fairly good description or a way of believing something and not believing it at the same time. That's why we love that kind of stuff. It's because that's why they say this is a big movie. It really is. It's an illusion. It's illusory. One of the ways you can find out is, what did you do at 2 o'clock in the afternoon 3 years ago today? Who knows? Illusion. Go back a week and try to remember. Illusion. You notice the thing, we're very selective about memory. Memory is all about what? Reinforcing self-centeredness. When you stop reinforcing self-centeredness, you start forgetting everything. But you don't forget what you need to know to function, not separate from this world, to be together with people. You care about people in a way they don't even know you care about them. People know you care about them. Maybe not. Follow me a little bit. Quite often we're trying to kill. Huh? I like that. Yes and no. Anything else?
What's time then?
It's an illusion. There is no time. I mean, there's something occurring in terms of movement in space, but from the point of view of this, what it is we're seeing, really, there isn't. There's just now. Like Eckhart Tolle says, in The Power of Now. This right here, it's timeless. It's like there's time and yet there's really not time. It's like when you go to sleep and then next thing you know you're awake and the whole thing is back again. There's just this big gap. For some reason we trust that. Okay, a doubt that you don't trust is a thought about something, that something is wrong or you don't know what you're doing and so on. The doubt that you do trust has no content. It's just space. And one of the ways you can do this is when you walk from here out to your car, your form of transportation, be in your body. Your body's moving through what we call space, but it's very thick. It's very thick, and your feet are actually your body's being pulled down by gravity. Without gravity, there would be no New York. So stay in the sense consciousnesses insofar as we can. Just be aware of very, very simple things. 6 sense fields and their objects. It's talked about all the time. And then when you get into that, then you start understanding what the 7th and 8th consciousnesses are if you start to study that material. And you begin to see that that is all available. It's a Yogacara Zen idea, but the Tibetans use it too. It's used in the Vajrayana. The idea of the 8 consciousnesses. There's the 5 sense fields, and then there's the 6th, which is the one that processes information and decides whether what we're smelling, tasting, seeing is good or bad or what it's used for. Development of ego. Seventh consciousness or klesha mind is the one that actually thinks there's a self, according to this teaching. It doesn't mean that this is it. This is just a grid to help us get some kind of idea on how consciousness works. And then the alaya, which is the eighth, is it's talked about as the store consciousness where everything comes down, karma, so to speak, comes down out of that to present this situation here. And it's also that when you're acting, anytime you react, something happens to you, and when you push on it, pull on it, or ignore it, you're actually, as it said in the Yogacara teachings, you're actually perfuming the eighth. You're loading it up with more stuff.
We hope you enjoyed this week's podcast. If you're in the New York City area, we encourage you to come by and participate in one of our weekly classes and discussions. If you're in the Austin, Texas area, please go to our website for more information about how to get involved in IDP Austin. If you're not able to attend in person, you can still stay connected through our interactive blog, our home study courses, and by signing up for our email list on our website, www.theidproject.org. IDP is a growing not-for-profit organization, and we rely on the support of our members and participants to keep our classes and podcasts available. If you're a regular listener of the IDP podcast or frequent our website, we ask that you become a global member by offering $10 to $15 a month to support our operations. Your generosity and effort in supporting the IDP community is greatly appreciated. Thanks for listening, and tune in again soon. Music courtesy of Kodomo and 5 Points Records. Please visit KODOMO music.com for more.